Morning everybody, Tim on Thursday here, coming to you from the field just north of the grain bins at the Chilton fertilizer plant. Field conditions this spring have been very challenging, and just kind of wanted to go through some planter setup and spring tillage ideas to help successfully get a crop stand established. So this field was soybean stubble last year. We decided to come in here and vertical till it. We ran about 1.5 degree on the disc gang with a vertical till unit and tried to just knock off some of the humps, make it somewhat level so we can come in and plant. We did get a dry top. You can see that it did dry out very well, but underneath, when you dig down underneath it, it is plenty of moisture yet, like this spring has been showing. So when you take that, you can ball it in your hand, and when you start to ribbon it, it's just to the point where it can almost start making a ribbon. So we want to try to do whatever we can to ensure a good stand in this field. So what we're looking at with spring decisions on tillage, when we're going in with a fuel cultivator, I think this year is going to be extremely challenging with a fuel cultivator trying to set it up to get what we want to accomplish, because the fuel cultivator is going to mix a lot of the wet and dry ground together, and we really want to try to keep that dry ground on top, so our gauge wheels run on top of this residue and on top of this dry ground. We need to keep that here. So the row cleaners should be set to just move some of these bigger chunks, but try to leave this top dry so the gauge wheels run on top of this. So one of the ways that I like to use a level here to put on where the gauge wheels actually ran, and then take my measuring tool to determine what my seed depth was. And it looks like we're approximately, what, 2¼ inches deep. I really prefer 2 inches deep. I mean, general rule of thumb is we always want to plant into moisture. That's number one, depending on the season and how the soil conditions rely on that, because that gives us uniform emergence. We want each seed to germinate at the same time. So the first 24 hours of that seed's life, if adequate moisture is there, it's going to imbibe that moisture. So we really want to plant it in moisture, and we want to ensure that the air is all pressed out around that seed. So a couple ways of doing that is making sure that the seed firmers are pressing the seed to the bottom of the trench, setting it in the bottom of our V. Second part is we're going to look at our closing wheel system to make sure that we got all of the air out from underneath that seed when we move ahead. Okay, so what we're looking for in the seed trench is we found our first seed, we measured across, and we're looking for that next seed to see how it was placed in the bottom of that trench. And you can see the cross section of this furrow is that our seed opening wheels ran here, our 2x2 fertilizer placement ran right here. So when we're picking across this wall, we're looking for that seed, and there it is. So we're looking from the seed to see if there's any air pockets below it, which there's not, and we're looking to make sure that there's no air pockets above it, all the way through that profile. So one of the things that we're doing when we come in here with the corn planter, we want to make sure that we run enough downforce on the row unit, but not too much. We want to stay on top of this and be light. So what we're looking at is, in the planter, we had adjusted the pressure downforce to make sure that we're not smearing this sidewall. You'll see in wet conditions generally is an issue where this sidewall would be smeared tight, and that seed placed in there would be, for example, would be in here, and this is very hard. You cannot penetrate that, and those little roots would have a hard time penetrating that also. So that's one thing with downforce, is downforce setting on the row unit creates the proper amount of weight on the gauge wheels, and the weight on the gauge wheels determines the row unit is planting at the correct depth. And also if the row unit is causing compaction. If we carry too much pressure on this section of ground, and that seed opener comes through there and slots this and makes it flat and smooth like this, that's not very good for our seed to get out of that trench and that's what causes a lot of delayed emergence and will restrict root growth later on in the crop's life. So wet soils generally are contributed to poor closing, sidewall smearing, and erratic depth. So going into the spring, we've been having only a couple days that seem to be fit that we get before a rain shower shows up. We got a bunch of our ground planted to the south of Chilton on some lighter soils. As we move into the northern sections, into the clays, into the clay loams we're here today, doing it with a field cultivator is going to be very challenging because of the depth that we're going to set that tillage equipment at to go through. Once we go through, if we set it too deep, we're going to bring mud up to the surface. It's going to be very hard. When we go too deep in the moisture, we're going to have a layer, our tillage layer, where our shovel drove across and lifted and moved soil, and that's going to leave a flat surface on that. So when we plant into that, we kind of want to set that true V of our planter at the very bottom of that. So if we could limit our tillage to about 1 3/4 to 2 inches, so that V goes and plants that seed at the very bottom, that last 1/4 inch to 1/8 inch, we press that V down through and get that seed placed at the bottom of it. It should help the roots to get out of that trench. So moving forward, I think field cultivator setup is going to be very challenging to get a good stand of corn established this year compared to vertical tillage in this year.